Hello and welcome to Food Co-op Initiative's webinar series. Today's topic is, let's start a food co-op. What do we do now? And this webinar is very much aimed at people who are just beginning the process of talking up a food co-op for their community. Food Co-op Initiative is a nonprofit organization. We have 3 staff members: Stuart Reed, our director; Jacqueline Hanna, our co-op developer, as well as Stuart; and myself. I'm Mary. I'm the Outreach and Operations Coordinator. For most of you who call in because you want to start a food co-op, I'm the first person you work with, and I'll help you through the first stages. Currently, we are supporting 140 startup organizations, people wanting to start co-ops in communities across the country, from Hawaii to Maine, Alaska to Florida. So we're seeing people everywhere want co-ops. Of that 140, no, they won't all decide to follow through, but a lot of them will. We have helped open the doors of 79 co-ops in the last 6 years. So that's pretty exciting to us. The Food Co-op Initiative being a nonprofit, all of our services are free and available to you. Our resources online, our extensive website library. You can call us with questions anytime. We expect you to call. We hope you call or email us. We want to know you're out there so we can help you and direct you and help make your life easier as you start a co-op. We also do take donations while we are a nonprofit, and you can find that information on our website. But we are supported by our sponsors. Our largest sponsors are the United States Department of Agriculture, their rural programs, National Cooperative Bank, and a few other places that are just too many to list, but we really appreciate all of their support. And we work with other cooperative development groups across the country, so we will send you to other people for information from time to time when you work with us. If you have any questions about the webinar today, we ask that you email them to info, I-N-F-O, at FCI, Food Co-op Initiative.coop. And those questions can be answered at the end of the program if we haven't covered them. Again, this is an overview today, so we're not going to go into in-depth. If you have specific questions, I'll probably get back to you privately afterwards. All of the webinar itself will be posted online after we're done recording it today. And there's a handout that goes with it that is already posted online, but it will be available at the close of the webinar for you to download as well. So today is, let's start a food co-op. What do I do first, or what do we do first? And again, I'm Mary from the Food Co-op Initiative. And my role here, besides doing the background work, is I work with startups in their very beginning as they start what is really a community organizing process. And I'm happy to do so. I come from a nonprofit background and have a lot of community organizing. I am the only person on our staff who has never started or run a food co-op, but I have done a lot of community organizing, so it helps. I'm joined today by Kathy Nash. Kathy's from Prairie Food Co-op in Lombard, Illinois, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Kathy Nash, as Mary said. I am a co-founder of Prairie Food Co-op, which is located in Lombard, which is a suburb about 20 miles straight west of Chicago. We started in 2012 as an idea, and it's grown from there. We are in stage 2B. We just entered stage 2B. We have about 515 owners right now. We're working towards 800 owners before we can sign a lease, and we are in lease negotiations on a site in Lombard. So it's been fun, and I'm happy to share any information I can with all of you.
And you're at an exciting stage, and just so that all of you say, what does that mean you're at 500, or what does it mean you're at stage B? We'll talk about that throughout the webinar. Let's get started. When you first look at our website, you see our logo. Our logo is important to us because the 3 circle icons represent the 3 stages of co-op development. The first stage is the organizing stage, and the center circle, I think we skipped a slide. No, I guess not. Sorry. The center circle represents what we call the kitchen table stage. It's where it starts. Most people start with a small conversation with a friend, a spouse, a partner, and it grows from there. So the kitchen table stage is very important. At the kitchen table stage, you may have shopped at a co-op, you may have read about a co-op, you may just be frustrated with your grocery stores, you may want different type of food than your local grocery store has. Every co-op has different reasons for getting started, and they're all valid. because the advantage of a co-op is you can customize your store to fit your community's needs. But at this initial stage, it's really more questions than answers, and you have a lot to learn. And just so you know, this is when we'd like you to call us, because we can help you sort through what you need to learn first, which this webinar will do some of. But the other thing that we do is we do track, like the map showed, all the startups that we know about in the country, and we track it for the entire cooperative industry to use that for statistics, so we appreciate knowing you're out there. After the kitchen table stage, when you're ready to talk to other people, you move to the outer circle of our first icon on our logo. Again, this is the organizing icon, and the outer stage represents extending into the community and bringing the community into the process. So the inner circle being the kitchen table, this outer circle is waves of expansion. The first time that you expand, you'll probably expand to maybe a dozen people, a few people, and you're looking for people who are like-minded and who want to help and who want to learn more. But these are people that also might become part of what we call a steering committee, the people who make a lot of efforts to get the next stages going. You're not talking membership yet, you're learning about the process of becoming a co-op, and you're coming to understand what it means. And I think Kathy might have some thoughts back to how confusing the stage was when they started.
It can be overwhelming. You know, when we started, we were familiar with food co-ops because I was a member of the Common Ground Food Co-op in Champaign-Urbana. At the time when I joined, it was in the basement of a church, and it developed and grew into a beautiful, bright store in a mall. But you know, we started by reading, there's a handbook, a guidebook called How to Start a Food Co-op, and it has so much great information, but it was a little overwhelming. So sometimes it's helpful to just take one step at a time and realize it'll all fall into place eventually, and you don't have to do all things at the very beginning.
Thank you. It's true. And by the way, Common Grounds is the co-op that Jacqueline Hanna, my coworker, was general manager of, and moved it from the church basement out to that site, and then they have since expanded to other site as well. So it's a very, very large co-op in that area now. Kathy mentioned our book. We have a book that's free download online. It's at the bottom of our webpage. It's called How to Start a Food Co-op, and it's a collaborative endeavor from a group of organizations in the food co-op community. It's kind of overwhelming at first for somebody who's just starting, but most important would be the first 3 to 4 chapters. Not to memorize them and take them to bed and be able to recite them, but to look at them, because it'll tell you what you're in store for and help you decide if this is something you really want to take on and figure out what kind of help you need. So when you're in this first little more open meeting, if you have no business sense or no experience with budgeting, you might want to pay attention to who comes to this meeting and see if somebody there has some of those skills to fill the gaps that you're going to need moving forward to take that part of the discussion. We'll talk more about it, and we do have other resources. Because this is an overview, I'm going to mention some of those resources, but for instance, there's a webinar entirely on how to have your first meeting in the public. There's webinars on how to set up a steering committee, so don't panic about it all. But as you set more places at that table, you want diverse opinions and skill sets to come to this meeting. Some you may have to reach out and invite. If you have a meeting with, say, 15, 20 people, and you get home and you look at the sign-in and you realize you didn't get anybody that meets a need, talk to your friends and start brainstorming who you need to talk to. You want to reach out to local vendors and farmers who may be suppliers for the future store and see if they're interested in being part of the startup process. At the very least, if they're not interested in participating in the startup, at some point during the process, they may donate goods that you could use in drawings as incentives for memberships and things. Start developing your vision. This is a huge topic, and it sounds like such a simple thing. But the first time that you sit down as a group, you have to start to think about, what do we want our store to look like? And that's basically your vision is, what do we want our store to look like, and what do we want it to accomplish in our community? Again, we have resources online, and there are a whole series of webinars about it. But it's important that you get a lot of opinions on it. So when you have the first couple of people talking, you have one vision. And you take it out to a dozen people, your vision might shift. At each community meeting, until you incorporate, you may be shifting your vision a bit as you learn more about the needs of the community, and that's okay. You can dream, but you'll probably take some things off the board as you move forward too. This dreaming is really important with this, because if you don't envision the store actually being a retail grocery store, not just a group of people starting one, you might not come up with the grocery store you thought you wanted. So, did you guys spend a lot of time on vision at Prairie?
We all pretty much had a similar vision. I think we are a little bit unique in that in Lombard we don't have a lot of grocery stores for our community. We only have one, and our community can support probably 5 to 6. And so our main vision was to bring another grocery store to town, but that focused on local, sustainable, healthy food. So it was really broad from the beginning, which has been really great for us because it's allowed us to make it broad enough to appeal to a lot of people and to narrow it down as we get towards opening day, so we haven't locked ourselves into saying, oh, we're going to have a deli, and then our market study comes back and says, well, your community really wouldn't support a deli and a size of store that we're recommending. So we purposely left it pretty vague and pretty broad.
That's good. I think that's a very good starting point, but make notes of all those things that are on your wish list, like a deli. And Kathy mentioned something there called the marketing study. Don't worry about that yet. We'll get to it. It doesn't happen in this early organizing stage. But by the time it does happen, you'll have the skills and knowledge to know how to deal with it. So, next slide. Draw from this group. Every time you have a meeting, you have new faces that come to the meeting. Every conversation you have when you're out and about in your community, you can be thinking about who would benefit from being part of this group and who would the group need. So you need to develop a steering committee, which is an informal group that will act as the leadership until you get incorporated and have a board of directors. But you also need people who say, oh, I don't want to be that involved, but I'll hand out flyers at the farmer's market, or I'll talk to my church group, or whatever people are willing to do. These advocates are part of what spreads the word. And spreading the word is really, really important at these early stages, and also really important to get their feedback towards the vision. I just can't say enough about talking it up. Even if you don't have all the answers, make notes of the questions, because you won't have all the answers at first. Next slide. All those people that do start to talk it up at some point need to get more information. And we're going to whip through some big ideas here that there are, again, entire webinars and materials on our website about, and we're happy to talk to you about. But the first thing being the co-op model that we tend to use, and we recommend it highly based on a lot of experience. Stuart has over 40 years, Jacqueline has over 10, and a whole bunch of other people that went into developing this have that type of experience too. What works and makes co-ops open and stay open and be sustainable? And you know, and as with any business that you open, is it going to be sustainable forever? Probably not. But we'd like to think that you're going to be here in 5 or 10 years and still meeting the needs of your community. Beyond that, you're going to have to, the store will be making its own plans for its longevity there. We talk about the 4-in-3 plan. It's 4 cornerstones in 3 stages. The cornerstones, very briefly, are vision, which we've talked a bit about. Talent, the people that come together to help build the co-op. In the beginning, this is a lot of people who are willing to talk it up and organize the community. As you move forward, this will shift, and at some point you'll be hiring somebody who's run a grocery store before, and people who understand how to run a grocery store and set on those barcode systems and all the stuff you're going to need. Capital, you know, this one scares people a lot because it takes a lot of money. In reality, you're going to open a multi-million-dollar business if you succeed. And that's pretty exciting. It's kind of like when somebody's expecting a baby, they think, oh great, we're going to have a baby, and they forget they're going to have a teenager. So you're at that, we're going to have a baby stage right now, but you need the capital to make it all the way through the process. Do you need it all right away? Absolutely not. Do you raise it all yourself? No, you don't. We will walk through some of that, but there's a lot more help coming to you throughout the process, especially as you move into feasibility. And then the other cornerstone is systems, and that's the first system is how you manage this group of beginning people. The next system starts with boards, bylaws, and you move forward throughout every little process. We have steps to get you through the budget development, how to decide on membership. All these systems will come into play, and you'll get a lot of people in the co-op community, not just at FCI, but in the broader community, willing to help you with this. The 3 stages that this happens in, is the organizing stage, which we are starting to call the inquiry and organizing. And most of you are probably at the inquiry stage. Then feasibility and planning. And this is when things like that market study Kathy mentioned come into play. And doing things like pro formas and formalizing your business plan and all of these steps that it takes to open any business. After that, you move into implementation. And when Kathy said they were at 2B, they're in the feasibility stage, but they're moving into the implementation stage as they get into a lease and all of those steps. And that's a pretty exciting time, but I bet it's kind of scary too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Once that lease is signed, yep.
It seems so real all of a sudden, right?
Right.
Yeah. So this is just a brief overview of the 4 and 3. There's a lot of materials that we'll be sending your way if you call and ask about it, or that you can find on our website. But again, do call and get on our list at some point so we know you're out there. Next slide. Cooperatives are one of the purest forms of democracy in action, and there are cooperatives all around us. A lot of people get their power from an electrical cooperative. Most people have heard of some farm co-ops. A cooperative is a business model. It is not necessarily a healthy grocery store. It can be lots of things. There are some interesting, unusual cooperatives that are not typical. There are carpet companies that are cooperatives. There are hardware stores that are cooperatives. One of the things that you probably will interact with in your life is the credit union, which is the cooperative version of a bank. So co-ops are all types, but they are all guided by the 7 cooperative principles, as you will be within your store. And this has to be at the core of your bylaws as well. The 7 cooperative principles are very general and vague, but they're very important. The first one is voluntary and open membership. Open to anybody. You will have rules about membership. You will have to decide them. Can you have multiple members per household? Do you have levels of membership? These are things you can decide, but it's voluntary and open to anyone. Democratic control. Every member gets a vote. In most cases with an established co-op or a co-op further along the line, they're voting on board members who will make the decisions for them, as in most democratic processes in our country. But in the early stages, you may be taking, raise your hands at meetings, and I'll bet Kathy probably had some of those meetings where it was like, should we go A or B? And you had to have some sort of democratic control on it.
Yeah, I think it's really important at the beginning to have a good model for decision making, because I think at the beginning you can come to some key decision points, and if there's not agreement, it can be really advantageous to have a policy beforehand on how your group wants to make decisions. Is it consistent?
Yeah, and you probably won't have that when you have just 2 to 10 people. You'll probably move into that at the next stage, just generally. Having a little bit of skill with conflict resolution can come in handy too, or having somebody on hand who has it, because people won't always agree. And everybody that comes to the table probably brings a valid point to consider whether it will become part of your action or not. Members' economic participation. You buy into the co-op as a member. When the co-op is open, anybody can shop there, but anybody who is a member/member owner, as we call them too, is one of the owners of the co-op. This is not unlike if you buy a share in a business. The biggest difference because the co-op is locally owned and locally controlled, whereas if you buy a share in a major business, the control is with a board of directors that may be in another country, it may be a global conglomerate. So this is a big difference in how it applies to your community. But again, that member will have economic participation set by deliberation among the members as they set up their co-op, and by reasonable expectations that they need to meet. Autonomy and independence. I mean, this one's pretty self-explanatory, I think, but co-ops are their own businesses and they do their own thing, but they work within these principles and within the laws of their state, obviously, as well. Education, training, and information. Cooperatives, food co-ops, you see this if you've been in a food co-op that has classes or that puts out great website information, just all sorts of training for people. It can be training for their employees, it can be training within the community. We've seen co-ops do like the 5 ingredient workshops where they'll have training sessions where they'll pick 5 ingredients and have people come in and make meals with them and show them how simple it is. training in how to read food labels, whatever it is, but training also in how to operate a grocery store, how to bring people up from your staff so that they want to work there for a long time. All of these steps are very important, and education within the broader community about food and the importance of the food chain in our culture. Number 6. You'll hear this one referred to as P6. The principles are often referred to as P1 or P6. P6 is really deceptively simple in what it says. Cooperation among cooperatives. But it really happens. One of the first things that many of you may have come to the table with is having been in a co-op, as Kathy mentioned. And so your first reaction when you start to talk to other people is, what, you've never been to a co-op? You're going to go visit one, and you go visit a co-op. Then a lot of people want to talk to the general managers there and about how they did it. Well, that's not going to help you much yet, because the general manager runs the store, and they probably weren't on board with the startup stage. But if they're smart, like most of them are, they'll say, call Food Co-op Initiative, and we hope you do. But further down the line, those general managers can be very useful. If you're opening up a store in Illinois, and you might call Common Grounds and say, we're having trouble finding a lawyer to do our bylaws that understands cooperative law. Can you tell us who you used? And things like that. There's specific things that it's great for. We just don't want you to pester them to death at first, because then they won't want to work with you later when you really need them.
I'd also add to that entails cooperation among other startups. And so there's even a Facebook page you can join where startup groups across the country talk about issues that probably every co-op faces. So for instance, if you're looking for a resource such as an attorney, you can ask on that page, and you'll likely to get quite a bit of good information. And I know Mary and Stuart are also participate in that Facebook group.
Yep, all the time, and Jacqueline as well. There's another level where this happens. Within the cooperative community, there are many lenders besides those credit unions. There's organizations like Shared Capital and the National Co-op Bank, and a whole slew of them, self-help. I can't name them all right now. When you reach the point where you need to borrow some money to move forward with a building or with a leasehold improvements or whatever point you're at, they are so cooperative with each other that if you call up one of them and tell them your situation and they have you send stuff, they'll tell you to tell it to another one too, and then those people will get on the phone and hammer out what they can do to help you. And so when you wind up with, you'll get a package of things from a group of organizations that are all co-ops or co-op based and are there just to help co-ops. So it's P6 is a pretty fascinating thing to watch. And I've been really impressed with how non-competitive startups are with each other and their information, even when they're very close proximity to each other. We do a conference called Up and Coming for startups, and I think a lot of the best conversations take place at the lunch table there. Oh, we did this. Oh, wow, what did you do with that? And it's just really exciting to see. The 7th principle is concern for community. And while it seems obvious to people that you're trying to get good, healthy food into your community, or that you're trying to get a grocery store at all into your community, depending upon what your situation is, the concern for community can take many turns. Many co-ops that live in mixed income communities find that they need to have a way to get the low-income shoppers in the neighborhood to feel welcome in the store, and so they have programs that bring them in or specials for them. Some places offer a discounted membership. There's lots of levels for that. How you give back to the community is important. We have a startup organization that's going to be opening this year, and they've had so much support from their community, which has had a high school that's brought the marching band to every event for them for a few years, and they're marching in their own street clothes, and they decided when they first turn a profit, they want to chip in towards uniforms for the high school band. So there's a lot of ways people are part of the community. Let's move on from the principles, though. Everybody who talks about your co-op should be able to share ways a co-op adds value to your community. This happens to be a poster that was done by a group called Assabet, and I think it's got a lot of good points. You can add more points. We have a lot of links available for talking about what co-ops does, but co-ops, the dollars stay in your community. It creates local jobs. If you can't get food, like if you live in a northern climate, you're not going to get oranges from the northern climate. When you buy from one of the co-op distributors, you're getting food that's probably grown by other co-ops or by farms who support co-ops in that region. So it's a network of co-ops. Yes, you want to have your co-ops, the convenience of the store. Affordability depends upon where you're at. I mean, if your neighborhood may need, affordability is relative, so it depends upon what neighborhood you're in, really. A gathering place is often a part of a co-op. If you have a deli, that's one way. If you have a classroom space, there's just all sorts of ways that it can be a gathering spot. And then to support local growers, local food, the local producers of honey and soap and whatever else you have, and educate people about that too. So just think about what are the assets in your community, read some of the other materials that we can link you to, and get everybody on board with some talking points on that one. Next slide. The other thing that people have to have a clue about when they're talking to other people is, yes, there's going to be memberships, and you pay to join as a member owner. You don't pay to shop, you pay to be a member owner. So you will have to decide as a group what membership models you want and what your fees will be. This is not something that you have to sit down and pick out of the air. This is something that there's guidelines in the book that the co-op developers like Stuart and Jacqueline and other people across the country can help you with, that talking or asking, gathering brochures from other co-ops about what they do or looking at their websites. There's lots of ways to set this. As you move into studies, I'm sure Kathy found this to be true, you move into the studies, you get help determining what you need to bring in membership fees. I don't know who you worked with, Kathy, but I'm sure you had some guidance on this.
Oh yeah, the studies that you do further down the line are really going to guide the process down the path, because it gives you an idea of how big the store can be, and then you kind of drill down from there on how many owners you need to support the store that size and so on.
Right. And it's also based on the population of the community as well. So why does this matter so early on? Well, it matters for 3 reasons. One is that at some point you're going to have to write bylaws, and you're going to want to have made a decision about this when you get your bylaws down. Another point is people are going to ask, what does it cost to be a member? And you don't want to just say, oh, we'll tell you later. You want to have some guideline, even if you don't have a final answer. Like, we're trying to keep it at around this amount or under this amount. But, and you can just have it be a little bit open. But the other thing is, when you go out, when you hit those other stages, I mean, just like when you buy a house or buy a car and you go to get a loan, they look at your credit score. Your membership, your following the 4 and 3 plan, and your business plan and all those steps that we're going to talk about are what they look at. It's kind of like your credit score when you go to ask for help from lenders and from other organizations. And that's just a good perspective to have. If people say, well, why do you care now? Think of it as building a credit score. It's the same idea. That makes some sense. So at some point you will get legal. You'll incorporate. Every state has some way for a co-op to exist. Most states in the United States have cooperatives as a legal entity that you can organize as a co-op. A few do not, and then they tend to do it as a corporation that is called a not-for-profit corporation, because you will be aiming to put what profit you make back into the co-op or donate within the community. A handful of places do not have either. This is why it's really important that at some point you need a local lawyer who is familiar with cooperative laws, not just who happens to have come to your board and has only done divorces and adoptions. You need somebody who gets cooperative laws. This is why you cannot go to your local community college and have them draft your bylaws, because they don't understand cooperative laws. Same thing with business plans. So there's some times you need experts, and they're worth paying for because they'll save you an awful lot of headaches. Once you get incorporated, you have a vehicle to take in money. When you take membership fees, they are not taxable. They are equity within the organization. But if you get donations from people, or if you get money in before you're incorporated, it's taxable income. It might be taxable to a person rather than an organization if you've done no legal groundwork. So you really have to be careful with that. Talk to a lawyer. And definitely, a good accountant is helpful at some point too. Once you get incorporated, that steering committee either becomes the board or goes away and a board is elected. So it's a big step. It's a ways down the line, but it's really a critical step in moving to the next level. I don't know when did you guys incorporate, Kath? What point in the process?
We incorporated about 6 to 8 months into the process, and we did it about 2 to 3 months before we started selling ownerships.
Okay, which is very good. And People say, well, can't we do a Facebook, or can't we do a fundraising page, a crowdfunding page, or somebody wants to donate money? It gets tricky, and you really should consult an attorney or a good accountant or both before you get into that. So your core group of people are talking it up, and you're ready to take it out to more people. This is what we call bring it to the people, build that community around. This might be more meetings. It might be that you do tabling at a farmer's market. You're sharing the vision. It's just, how do you get the word out? You may be able to get an interview in your local newspaper. Anything you can do to get the word out, and anything you can do to make sure that the core people who are answering all those questions are giving the same answers is really important. We have a lot of free resources. If you have a meeting, we have videos about why a food co-op in our community. We have PowerPoint presentations. You can customize them yourself. We have tons more. I can't even begin to name it all. We have over 1,000 resource items on our website. Because there's so many, it can be hard to find what you're looking for, so take a stab with the search box if you don't see it, and then send me an email and I'll help you find it. So no problem. Gather info at meetings when you can, even at tabling events and that. At the very least, get names and email addresses so you can put them on a mailing list. Tell them when you set up a Facebook page or a website. But if you have a more formal meeting, I suggest even using like index cards and asking them to put their name, phone number, email. And then if they have a skill set they'd like to share, or if they have some time to volunteer, have them make a note about it. Because you will not know all these people personally. And if you come up with 5 people who say, hey, I'm at the farmer's market anyway, I would love to do this. Or 2 people that say, I helped start a business before. I'm happy to work on that group that works with the bylaws. You never know who's going to come to your meetings, and you need them all. So, there's a lot of different marketing techniques. If you follow our Facebook pages, I think we do a pretty good job of showing some of them. You can look at the websites of other co-ops and see lots of them. What's been your favorite marketing event, Kathy?
Well, right before we started selling ownerships, and it was about a year into our organizing, we had a big festival that focused on local food. We called it Harvest Fest, and we partnered with the local historical society. We used their space. And they kept insisting we weren't going to draw more than 100 or so people, and we had nearly 1,000 people show up. And it actually allowed us to have an interview in the Chicago Tribune and an interview on WGN Radio. So it generated a lot of excitement and interest in what we're doing.
Yeah, that's really special. That was very cool. You may not get 1,000 people at your events, but every person is valuable. So just anybody you can reach, it's important. Bring it to the people, as we say. Moving on. Next slide. Okay. Branding basics. What do you mean branding? Before you really start to market your co-op, you should probably name your co-op, and you should probably come up with a logo. Might these change at some point over the process of building your co-op? Yeah, it might, and that's okay. But at least get something down so that people recognize you, and they can put a little lawn sign out that says, I joined the co-op. I joined Prairie Food Co-op. We have a series of webinars called Branding Basics, and the Branding Basics for Stage 1 is excellent. We also have other materials online about this, including templates that you can use for brochures. But again, just the basics that talk about how you decide on a logo, how you decide on a name. We encourage you to have co-op in the name of your store. We also encourage, when you do a website, that you get a .coop domain instead of a .com domain. You'll come to those points, and you'll know you should just call us and ask us if you have questions. I want lots of phone calls. So you will need a website or a Facebook page pretty early on, or both. And you may, if you use other, Twitter tends to be pretty common. Some people use Instagram, but really Facebook is the most common. And if you search for co-op, CO-OP, because if you leave the hyphen out, you're talking about a chicken coop. But co-op, you will find an awful lot of co-ops out on Facebook. When you're ready to set them up, there's a few things you need to keep in mind, and I'm looking at things all the time, people's websites all the time. It's kind of like the joke on Simpsons when they talked about they lived in Springfield, but nobody knew what state. And there's a Springfield in about 40 states, so it was very vague. If you don't put down the name that your co-op is Prairie Food Co-op in Lombard, Illinois, someplace on your homepage, you're doing a disservice to the search engines and the people who are going to find you. Be it people who want to participate in the process, or later when you're open and people who want to shop at a store and they're on vacation in your area, and how do they find where's a co-op in that area. So make sure you have some of those simple things in. Keep it up too. Make sure that if you're showing your membership numbers that you keep showing them, because nothing makes people want to join more than seeing that other people are doing it too. You might want handouts as well and some other things. Timelines are something that confuse people. There's an example here of the South Philly timeline. I can tell you that their steps are right, their timeline turns out not to be right, and they hit some hiccups on the line, this particular group. Every group has its own hiccups. Don't be surprised at that. But the importance of starting with a timeline at the beginning, it gives you a little bit of a glimpse into how long this is really going to take. If you're just starting now, are you going to open a store next year? No, you're not. It's going to take time to build the membership to the point where you can get the capital to move into the next steps. It's going to take time to do those marketing studies, feasibility steps. And we talk about this a lot in that How to Start a Food Co-op book. And we have the sample templates like this one that you can use to set up your own timeline. Take a stab at it yourselves. Call us. Talk to other people. We can aim you at people to help you with this. And know that you're going to change it. It's not a failure if you miss a timeline designation. It's just a change. So you just have to be realistic about what's going to work for your group. How many times did you change your timeline, Kathy?
I don't even want to admit that. A lot. I mean, Mary's right. It's just going to change so much, and I think it's important at the beginning to be realistic, as Mary stressed, because it's really hard at the beginning to say, you know, this process for most people takes 4 to 5 years, and I had a hard time with that, and we were like, oh, we'll do it faster in 3 years, but at the beginning, people remember what you tell them, and if you said we're opening next year, or we're going to be open in 2 years, and you know it takes you 4 to 5 years, which is the average, it's good to be as realistic as you can up front. It makes it easier.
And you can keep their interest in between by having events.
Right.
By doing, like we recently on our blog talked, somebody did FED talks, food education talks. So there's all sorts of things you can do to hold the interest of people. But you'll notice on this particular timeline that the beginning step, the big step at the bottom, is the big one. And that was naivety, because really it's not, the organizing is not the big one. It is a big one. It can be a slow one for some people. But the bigger ones come when the time frame comes when you're in, and the money frame, when you're in feasibility and some of those things. It takes more time than you think. We're going to talk in a bit about pitfalls, but pitfalls are things assumptions that you make. The fewer assumptions you make and the closer you stay to what the guidelines in the book and the people that you're talking to tell you, the closer you can stay to your timeline. But there's also things outside of your control. So we'll move on. Yeah, you're really starting to co-op. If you can get through looking at some of this and think, yeah, we can do this. This is doable. We'll break it down. We'll share the load. Keep the momentum level high. You want to have activities for people once you start to talk to the community so they don't lose sight of you. And that really helps with the, hey, we can't open for 4 years part. Keep your social media and your website current. Again, that's your image. Kathy, did you guys hire a project manager at some point?
We actually just hired our first real employee about 2 months ago. So we waited a lot longer than some co-ops, but it was mainly because our main community outreach coordinator person, who was a volunteer, started a full-time job, and it really affected our efforts, and we realized to continue at the pace we needed and to do all the events and outreach that was necessary to grow our owners, we had to hire someone. So we convinced that person to leave their job, and now they're working for us.
There you go. It's not uncommon for co-ops to hire a project manager, a part-time person, often somebody from within the group that's been working there, to take on some of the more advanced part of getting membership to the point that they need it to move on to the next step, or to take on specific tasks. If you're looking at a site, there's a lot of work to be done about sites. Once you're developing a site, there's a lot of follow-through that needs to be done. So yes, at some point you may consider hiring a project manager. This would be money well spent. You're saying, what money? Well, you'll be going through all the steps, and you'll start to see that this is doable, and you will be able to afford it, and you may not even be able to move forward if you don't do it at some point, because you're going to just kill your whole volunteer committee, and they're going to be burned out. So follow the plan. Follow the plan seriously. Again, the 4 and 3 people say, oh, but we can do it our own way, and we don't want to do this, and we don't want to take the time it takes. We want to skip that. Oh, the talent will come later. Oh, whatever. We really see the highest success rate by far, and the chances of staying open after a few years by people who stick to the 4 and 3 model. And does it work in every situation? No, it has to be tweaked occasionally. There are a few places that we have to tweak it, but 99% probably it's the one that we're closest to, and the one you should certainly understand and go back to when you're in doubt. We want you to survive. We don't want you to just open a store. We want to come down there in 5 years and shop at it. Pitfalls. This is really timely because just this month in the Cooperative Grocer magazine, Stuart Reed, our director, had an article about why some co-ops fail. And the biggest thing that struck me out of it was he looked at co-ops over a 10-year period. The co-ops that we looked at, of 110 co-ops in the last 10 years that have startup co-ops that we've worked with, of the ones that opened and the ones that wound up closing, and you can see in the first part of the diagram, about 25% failed, closed. But if you look at the graphic that breaks that out more, you'll see most of those failed because they didn't have a big enough store. And people think, oh, but if we start small, we can grow. You've got to build for the future needs, not for the immediate ease of the people working on the store. So of the startups that fail, 75% that opt for less than 4,000 square feet didn't make it. So that's really an important thing to keep in mind. Next slide. Other things matter as well, and these were some of the things that Stuart listed in the article. The size, the small retail, but startup budgets being set significantly below that co-op averages. We have, between the co-op developers in the country, we have co-op averages. We share them with you. If you say, oh, I don't like that idea that we're going to need $1 million here, we can get by on 200,000. We know in our heart of hearts that your chances of opening a store just went down considerably. Unusually short or truncated development timelines. Everybody wants to do this. Everybody wants their store in a year or two. Again, it's really a tough thing to convince people. Stick with the plan. You're more likely to have a store that opens and stays open. Over-reliance on member labor. This is on many levels. One level is when you really need a project manager, are you still leaning on your volunteers? But once you open, some stores expect to run member labor, which gets into a lot of issues, including work comp law issues. But at some point, you're a business, and you need to run like a business in order to succeed as a business. 2 more red flags. One is having your heart set on the site the day you start the conversation or too early in the conversation. Just because the Winn-Dixie down the block closed doesn't mean that their store site is where you should put a co-op. The feasibility and marketing studies will tell you where you should put a co-op, and it's based on traffic flow and spending patterns in neighborhoods and how many parking spaces they have and an enormous number of things, including can the building handle the electrical load and the refrigerator weight and all sorts of stuff. So don't have your heart set on the site. We can't say it enough. I know it's hard, but the best site is going to come and show its way, and maybe it will be there, but maybe not. Besides, if it takes 4 years, whoever owns it doesn't want to wait that long to lease it to you. Then the other thing that is sometimes people want to convert or save an existing grocery store that's going out of business, which can be done and has been done successfully in a few instances, but mostly we're seeing that these close within a few years anyway. So it's something that it's situation by situation, and that's when you should be talking to Stuart because he has the most experience on this. Kathy, did you guys hit any pitfalls?
I would say, well, no, because we haven't, picked a site and we didn't have our sites, set on anything. I would say we've been really willing to hire outside consulting when we need to. We are very adamant that we have an opportunity to do this right, and we need to take advantage of all of the resources that are out there. So, for instance, when you're doing your financial planning and the pro forma work, we would never have thought to rely on our inside financial consultant that we have as a member. We went and hired someone who has quite a bit of experience in the food co-op sector. So we haven't hit any of these. That's not to say we haven't had pitfalls, and I'm happy to talk about those.
Well, not all the pitfalls are things Stuart listed here, because I think lots of times it comes within the expectation category of what groups are working on and the multiple perspectives of expectations.
Right, and I think that's a good point. So, at the beginning, the core founders, which were myself, my husband, and a couple other key volunteers, were really adamant about following the FCI development model, and we just assumed that everybody else in our steering committee that eventually became the board would be on board with that. So we didn't talk about all that much how we plan to open the grocery store. We just thought, well, we'll all follow the FCI development model, the 4 and 3 model that Mary's talked about. And about a year into organizing, we realized there were several members of our board who just were not okay with following that model for whatever reason, and it really created a rift in our board. And I think if we had been more clear from the start about our plans, not only our vision, but actually how we planned to go about building this business, it would have been very helpful.
And it could happen, that's one way it could happen. Expectations, in all our relationships in life, expectations can really get in the way sometimes. So lots of communication needs to happen, lots of confirming that people are on the same page all the way through the process. This article that I cited will be available online in a couple of weeks on the Cooperative Grocer website. But mostly, I think Kathy would agree with this, you should have fun doing this, because the startup process is amazing. You're going to meet great people. There's going to be a lot of positive energy. You're going to get to taste and eat food. I don't know. I mean, what would you say is the most fun? I don't know if you can say the most fun, Kathy, but what's fun?
It's just so rewarding to put so much time and energy and effort into something and see the enthusiasm over it building in your community over the years as people really start to understand what it is you're doing. And honestly, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's by far the most rewarding thing I've ever done, and I know most people on our board would say the same thing. And you're just going to meet people you would not normally come across and working on this, and it's just such energizing and exciting work.
And one of the things that's going to come up that you're going to hear about, we have a newsletter, we have a Facebook page, we have a website, we talk about it all the time. Up and coming is a retail food co-op conference just for startups. And it's been held in Indiana, but we've gotten too big for the space there, so next year in March it's moving to the Milwaukee area, where Outpost Foods, a huge, wonderful co-op with several sites, will be our food co-op host. And it's put on by the Indiana Cooperative Council and by FCI and some other partners. It's a really fabulous event, full of workshops. And I know Kathy's been more than once, I believe.
We've been to the conference every year since we've started organizing. Okay. It's fabulous. I cannot highly enough recommend going.
Right. And there are so often scholarships available, but it's worth putting it. A couple of people from your group should go as soon as you know you're serious about it. And just keep watching for the information. We don't have the exact dates yet. It will be in March. As soon as we have the dates, we'll be posting it on our website. So, next slide. I hope that this was some information to get you started. There is a handout that's on our website. It will be archived, and you can always call and ask for help. I'll send you any links you need. We'll work through special situations. And we're pragmatic. Sometimes we're going to say to you, boy, you live in a town that's 300 miles from a major city and you have a population of 150, a co-op is probably not going to work there. What other options can we help you find? We only work with starting retail food co-ops, but we know people that do other things like buying clubs and that, and we'll try to aim you. Next month, we're going back to the discussion of the capital campaigns, and I know that Prairie Food has been doing one recently themselves, but we are talking to Green Top Grocery about their campaign, and they were one of the people that tested the new capital campaign workbook that we were talking about in our last webinar. So this really encourage you to look at that. Is it too early for those of you who are just thinking, wow, I need a steering committee to watch that webinar? Maybe, but not necessarily. But we do have an archive of tons of webinars that cover all stages. They're available from our homepage, and we'll be happy to help you find one that meets your needs. So again, next month, third Tuesday at 1 o'clock Central Time, we will have a webinar. This will not be a live webinar. It's unusual in that it will be pre-recorded this time. Thank you very much. I did get 2 questions. They're very specific to situations, and I'm going to answer them individually. rather than here. And I want to thank Kathy Nash for so generously giving of her time and their experience. And Kathy, can you just give people some great motivating thoughts before they leave?
I would say, it's a lot of information and there's a lot to absorb and a lot to learn, and just don't let that overwhelm you. Just take it step by step, and there's so many resources out there. We've had mentor co-ops who are Green Top Groceries, one of them, who've helped us along the way, and anytime you have a question or need some guidance, don't feel free to reach out to FCI or fellow co-ops. I'm happy to answer questions, and most co-op startups are. So just know that you're in good hands and that there's so many people out there who've been in your shoes and are so excited for you guys to start up in your community and to help you out.
Yeah. And really, thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're glad you joined us, Kathy. Thank you very much.
Sure.
We'll see you next time, folks. Thank you.
Bye.